I'm sorry to take that moment and go over that, but it's important that people have an understanding, and I hope this is helpful for people to grasp this. So to continue with this package, I wrote up the 30 pages. This is now a summary of understanding with select talking points in history. Number one, the Libra Code of April 24th, 1863, also known as Instructions for the Government of Armies of the United States in the Field, General Order Number 100, or Libra Instructions, was an instruction signed by President Abraham Lincoln to the Union forces of the United States during the American Civil War that dictated how soldiers should conduct themselves in wartime. It was named after the German-American jurist and political philosopher Francis Lieber. The main section concerned with martial law, military jurisdiction, and the treatment of spies, deserters, and prisoners of war. Number two, ethical treatment under the Libra Code. The document insisted upon the humane ethical treatment of populations in occupied areas. It was the first expressly codified law that expressly forbade giving no quarter to the enemy, i.e. killing prisoners of war, except in such cases when the survival of the unit that held these prisoners was threatened. It forbade the use of poison, stating that use of such puts any force who uses them entirely outside the pale of the civilized nations and peoples. It forbade the use of torture to extract confessions. It described the rights and duties of prisoners of war and capturing forces. It described the state of war, the state of occupied territories, the ends of war, and discusses permissible and impermissible means to attain those ends. It discussed the nature of states and sovereignties and insurrections, rebellions, and wars. As such, it was widely considered to be the first written recital of the customary law of war in forces between the civilized nations and peoples since time immemorial, and the precursor to the Hague Regulations of 1907, the treaty-based restatement of the customary law of war. I believe I got that right off WikiLeaks. That was just a general summary of what the Libra Code was. I continue with, the Libra Code can also be considered a public trust administrative agreement. Number three, under Article 2 of the Libra Code, martial law does not cease during the hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the Commander-in-Chief or by special mention in treaty of peace concluding the war, and the occupation of a place or territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace as one of the conditions of the same. So this seems to be a very important item under the Libra Code. You have to remember, I just said a few minutes ago about there is a declared national state of emergency that was declared by FDR. So currently we're under that still, to the best of my knowledge, and it seems, I believe it's renewed every few years, that the United States is still under bankruptcy. So it can end as soon as the Commander-in-Chief does a special proclamation to bring the conclusion of the war. And again, that's all that would take place. The same way it was declared, it could be undeclared. I continue with number 4. Under Article 3 of the Libra Code, martial law in the hostile country consists in the suspension by the occupying military authority of the criminal and civil law and of the domestic administration and government in the occupied place or territory. and in the substitution of military rule and force for the same, as well as in the direction of general laws, as far as military necessity requires the suspension, substitution, or dictation. Number 5. Under Article 7 of the Libra Code, martial law extends to property and to persons, whether they are subjects of the enemy or aliens to that government. Of course, I think that's self-explanatory. Let me repeat it. Martial law extends to property and to persons, whether they are subjects of the enemy or aliens to that government. Number 6, under Libra Code, Article 31, a victorious army appropriates all public money, seizes all public movable property until further direction by its government, and sequesters for its own benefit or of that of its government all the revenues of real property belonging to the hostile government or nation. The title to such real property remains in abeyance during military occupation and until the conquest is made complete. Again, I think that's self-explanatory. What it's basically saying is they hold all public money, movable property, until there's, they get the benefit of it. So it's like the birth certificate. They take that birth certificate, securitize it, get all the Federal Reserve notes out of it, and then they get the benefit, and then we get the liability. Number 7. Under the Libra Code, Article 38, private property, unless forfeited by crimes or by offenses of the owner, can be seized only by way of military necessity for the support or other benefit of the Army or of the United States. If the owner has not fled, the commanding officer if the owner has not fled, the commanding officer will cause receipts to be given which may serve the spoliated owner to obtain indemnity. Well, this is this is a big one. Let me reread it. Private property, unless forfeited by crimes and by offenses. Well, what happens when you make a claim to property that does not belong to you, the name, which again is based on presumption? That's how government officials make money. As soon as you make a claim, they get to dip into those funds, the Sestake trust funds or estate funds that are held in abeyance. That goes back to Article 31, and dip into that. They can't just go in there and take it. They have to have some reason. They just cannot go and take it. And as soon as you give them a reason, like if you go into court, they're able to pull whatever out of it. I don't know exactly how it works. It's not important that I know exactly how it works. All I know is when one makes a claim to somebody else's property as being his own, that presents itself a problem, particularly in a court of law. What evidence do you have that you own that name? It's based on your presumption. So what happens is, let's reread this. Private property, unless forfeited by crimes or by offenses of the owner, can be seized only by way of military necessity. So again, it was military necessity. There was a declared national state of emergency. The term by necessity is, law doesn't matter. It's necessity. It's an absolute. So whatever law is that's put to the side, it now is required that the government needs this by way of military necessity for the support or other benefit of the Army or of the United States. If the owner has not fled, the commanding officer will cause receipts. Well, what is that receipt? It's the birth certificate to be given, which may serve the spoliated owner to obtain an indemnity. So what they've done is what they've taken is your natural inherent God-given rights. Now again, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, look at me. I mean, they stole this. It's horrible. I'm angry. I'm going to get them. No, no, no. I'm not into that. That's not what this is about. The problem is they want it both ways, and that's where we're going to discuss usufruct in a little bit. That's a very important term that we have to study and really get through our heads. They want to take the control of your natural rights, no problem. Then two, they would be subject to the liability. So what that would say is, which would be under 12, well no, excuse me, that's not correct. Which, if they're taking control of your natural rights, then they should be liable for whatever expenses or obligations you would incur under that name or property of the state. Now, if they want to give you the original title, which I tried, I called New York State. They referred to it as property. I said I'd like to have the original title. She said her name was Debbie, wouldn't give the last name. She said, no, it's not yours. Well, if it's theirs, that's great. I'm totally cool with that. If it's their property and they benefit every time I use that property, then they too should have the liability of discharging and acquitting any obligations from that property. And I should not be responsible for it. Continuing with this, number 8, under the Libra Code Article 44, all wanton violence committed against persons in the invaded country, all destruction of property not commanded by the authorized officer, all robbery, all pillage, or sacking, even after taking a place by main force, all rape, wounding, maiming, or killing of such inhabitants are prohibited under the penalty of death or such other severe punishment as may seem adequate for the gravity of the offense. So they, I guess, get to destroy whatever they decide, but it must be commanded, and they're not to take advantage of the inhabitants. Oh, I'm sorry, it goes on. A soldier, officer, or private in the act of committing such violence or disobeying a superior ordering him to abstain from it may be lawfully killed on the spot by such superior. Number 9, under the Libra Code Article 46, neither officers nor soldiers are allowed to make use of their position or power in the hostile country for private gain, not even for commercial transactions otherwise legitimate. Offenses to the contrary committed by commissioned officers will be punished with cashiering or such other punishment as the nature of the offense may require. If by soldiers, they shall be punished according to the nature of the offense. So then what I do is I go on summary of this, of the Libra Code. Summary of the above Libra Code information. It appears that since Lincoln, the United States, now under military seizure authority, seizes all public money, property, etc. to be held in abeyance and uses it for its own benefit out of necessity for the operation of its foreign army and administration. It is a requirement the commanding officer as authorized representative of the government to give a receipt to the spoliated owner if he had not fled, in order for the man to obtain indemnity. In essence, it appears what has been created as a trust where the property owner had been forced to surrender through operation of law such property or his man's dominion was confiscated to the foreign government by way of necessity to support its foreign occupancy. The Republic, Constitutional Republic, has been suspended in order to fund the Civil War. The suspension is still in effect today in order to administrate the current government operations perpetual bankruptcy. The commanding officer, as agent for the government, gives a receipt of indemnity, now commonly referred to as a certified birth certificate, as the original title or property has been paid, transferred, conveyed, assigned, or delivered property of interest therein made to or for the account of the United States, and that's under 12 U.S.C. 95A, and you may not find that under the internet easily because it was removed from Cornell. I wonder why. And is held in abeyance for this spoliated owner for the seizure of his or her rightful property, as man has full disposal rights of all the fruits of the usufruct, God's property, now left naked of those natural rights. Under the rules of usufruct, the man is now considered a naked owner of his natural disposal rights for his use, control, and possession, and the fruits from said natural rights, since the state or government had confiscated, seized those natural rights for its beneficial use. It could also be said that the government holds legal title and trust to the seized or confiscated property held in abeyance, thus holding that property during this military foreign occupancy until the conquest is complete. Furthermore, because of the hostile takeover, the officers or soldiers are not allowed to take advantage of the occupancy for private gain. Finally, Article 2 supports the idea that a treaty of peace with the occupational forces is possible upon a declaration of peace to the occupying forces. However, the military occupation still exists. It is interesting to note that since President Abraham Lincoln, the U.S. bankruptcy had been placed under emergency war powers, 12 Stat 319. This is evidenced currently in 50 U.S.C. 212, 50 U.S.C. 213, 50 U.S. 215. Every president since Roosevelt has reaffirmed the national emergency and consistently reissued executive orders under 12 U.S.C. 95. Furthermore, it appears General Orders 100 is confirmed through the Reconstruction Acts of 1867. It is a grant, and this is a quote, it is a grant of power to military authority over civil rights and civilians in time of peace. It is a new jurisdiction never granted before, by which, in certain particulars and for certain purposes, the established principle that the military shall be subordinate to the civil authority is reversed. Wow. Through bypassing congressional authority, the President, as Commander-in-Chief, can single-handedly declare full martial law and suspend the Constitution under what Constitution, period. Under what authority authorizes the President with such authority to act outside congressional authority? So that's a question I asked. The answer is there is no authority under a republic. The next question one may ask is, how is the President able to issue executive orders with authority under the Constitution? The answer appears to be that the original Republic Constitution for the United States of America was suspended, and a similar quasi-bankrupt corporation type of foreign military occupation had taken over with its foreign army due to the bankruptcy of the former government operated under the Constitution for the United States of America to a now similar, the Constitution of the United States of America, a democracy-type form of government. Another indicator that the United States is under military control or operating under the rules of war on the land is the finial, and that's in brackets I put gold eagle, acorn, or spike. Page 61, Army Regulations, pages 840-10, 1998, end brackets on the flag. The question arises how to continue to fund a bankruptcy. The Federal Reserve and the federal income tax were both created in 1913, where one pumps money into the system while one takes money out of the system. The country had been formally bankrupt in 1795, 1861, and 1933. By 1933, All the internal U.S. gold was confiscated by Executive Orders 6102, 6111, and 6260.